It was in 1973. I was in my late 20s. I was then staying in Rose Hill, More Itis, not married yet, and staying at my folks'. One day, my dad came home with a South African couple. He met them while coming back, and they were tourists visiting my riotous with their back bags, tents, and sleeping bags. Mauritius was still safe in that period, but independence was given by Great Britain in 1968 in a civil war had just meant a few months before. Two communities have fought for some political reasons. Anyway, my dad invited them home to sleep over for a few days. I remember the guy had a big blonde beard. He was very kind. His wife was as well. But I forgot her face. We decided to organize camping during a week on the west coast of Mauritius, in a place called Flick Con Flack. This place, which is now pretty developed, was at the time very wild with just a few houses. We went on a Saturday morning, found a nice place to put a tent, and organize the day. The South African man and his wife were very good swimmers and divers. We spent a lot of time in the sea, catching fish, crabs, some lobsters, which were getting scarce then. We don't find them anymore by the coast, and cooked all these goodies on a small homemade barbecue set. All of us, Mom, Dad, the couple, and I, really enjoyed the day. The sunset was beautiful. It was warm, and we were in summer, and everything was perfect. When night came, we were preparing a nice barbecue with chicken, beef, and pork, and a few shrimps we had caught earlier. This night was starry. My dad was happy and drunk, and the couple were obviously having a great time, since we were not fluent English. I was improving then. Communication was a little bit difficult, but we could make ourselves understand with gestures and sometimes drawings on the sand. It was a great fun seeing my dad trying to converse with them at the very limited knowledge of English. Anyway, it must have been around 9 p.m. We were all seated on the bench, waiting by the ocean as the starry sky was beautiful, and we were sitting by the campfire. Then we started to hear what sounded like a complaint. We cannot determine the sound of it, but it was like a woman wailing. It was faint but clear. Since the place we were at was wild and remote, the wailing was not consistent, but it could be heard from time to time. We put it on the some sorts of animals, since we were not people living on the coast, and being ignorant to the animals which might have been active at night. We were seated on the beach facing the ocean when suddenly we noticed someone coming out from the sea on our left at about 30 to 40 meters away. It looked like a woman with a long white dress just walking from the sea to the beach. We can now see her face, but could guess that she had long hair. The only lights were the stars in our bonfire. She silently made her way straight and disappeared from our view into the vegetation. We found this very odd. I knew it was not normal, but did not know what others were thinking. My dad was drunk and watched the scene with a little smile on his face. I think he was lost in his thoughts. We all looked at each other, and we had no idea what to think. I tried to check if there was a house where the woman walked to. I stood up and walked towards the sea and looked to my left to see where she went. There were only green bush and trees. There were no lights or any constructions around. I was now scared because I realized that we must have seen a ghost. I walked back to the bonfire, sat down, and told everyone they did not find any house there. We stopped talking, and everyone kept alert. We could now hear all the little noises of the night. We heard franked crackling like someone or something was quietly walking on dry leaves. Then suddenly, we heard about flapping noises on a tree nearby. It looked like large birds, pigeons, or bats flying away. It scared us. Then my mom told me quietly she felt something was not right. I and her were feeling like we were being watched. The couple was looking around with their glass in their hands. Then suddenly, something heavy fell in front of us on the beach about 5 to 6 meters away. I stood up to see what it was, but could not find anything. Everybody stood up and looked around, and there was nothing found. Despite the fact that the night was clear and sweat, the atmosphere had changed. Apart from my father, who was in a trip because he was too drunk, we were all scared by then. The couple talked between them, and I could not understand. They seemed to be quite concerned about the situation. I did not know what to do. I couldn't say anything because I didn't understand English enough. We were enjoying such a nice time. Before seeing that woman, it sucks that maybe we couldn't stay there, or maybe we would just go to sleep. It was a pity. In the middle of the night, we heard this bone-chilling scream, like a woman being attacked. It seemed close to our camp. We were on our feet, with our eyes about to pop out of our sockets. My heart was pounding so loud that I thought others could hear it. The couple started to pick up their stuff, and my dad followed them. Mom and I packed everything very quickly. As we were doing so, some coconuts fell off and rolled down on a camp as if someone had thrown them away. We were now scared to death, and no one would talk. We heard running on the beach, then in the woods, but could not see anything. We quickly put the stuff in the car, and it was not easy because we did not have a big car. We had taken our time to pack things so they could fit them in perfectly when we came down. Now, we had to pile up things. The worst was the barbecue. It was hot and dirty, and we did not want to leave it. I burned myself. Christ's trying to put it away. While we were packing away everything, things were happening around us. The scream seems to originate from different places, and there was a lot of noises going on. We all got to the car practically just squeezed in like a bunch of clowns. I decided to take the wheel because my dad was too drunk. As we moved away, we got a shock. We saw a woman dressed in white standing by the little lane looking at us. It was bone-chilling. I stopped the car. She was standing about 4 to 5 meters away. I didn't know what to do. I was too scared to move closer to her, but it was the only way out. We waited for a few minutes as she was standing there staring at us. I heard my mom praying and the South American people mumbling something between them. Suddenly, we heard a bang like something hit the car behind. We all turned to see what happened. The atmosphere was very tense, and I think my dad was becoming sober very quickly. He was now swearing. We did not see anything behind, but I looked forward. The woman was not there anymore. But the scariest thing happened. She was now standing by my door, looking at me. I can't describe the utter fear which took a hold of me. Then I released a scream. My throat was sore for several days after, and pushed the gas pedal. I think everybody screamed then. But, with panic, the car choked and the woman was still there looking at us. I remember not seeing her eyes or features because it was dark. I switched on the car again and drove as fast as I could. The poor car got shaken on the dirt road. They reached their main road, relieved and shouting, "What the hell have we just seen?" Fortunately, Rose Hill is not far from Flicking Flack. When we reached the town, the car broke down. I found Beth of the car had broken and the engine stopped from overheating. Fortunately, Rosa was not far from Flicking Flack. When we reached the town, the car broke down and the fan belt broke, and the engine has stopped from overheating. We were in the 70s, and there was no sew or towing services available that Saturday evening. The couple my mom walked home, which was not far. The South African couple stayed 2 more days at home and left. We never saw or heard from them afterwards. This would have been about 7 years ago when I was 18. I was bear hunting with my dad and my brother in the Allegheny National Forest near Teo Nesta, Pennsylvania. The area we were hunting was one that I had camped in with my family since the time that I could walk because of the experience that I had in the woods up there. I was allowed to hunt by myself. I remember it was getting later in the day, just about time to turn back and hike back to camp. There were maybe 4 inches of snow covering the ground, and judging by the sky, more would fall soon. The light had just started to fade, and the heavy foliage as I was slowly hiking along the ridgeline, stopping every few minutes to look and listen. As I was making my way towards camp, I heard a small child's voice off in the distance. "Dad!" The voice sounded like it belonged to a little boy, and I froze, trying to pinpoint his location. "Dad!" The voice cried again, this time more frantically. Finally, "Dad, help!" Then, "Help! Help!" My immediate thought was that the boy had been split from his father, and was realizing how dark it was starting to get out in the big woods, but he sounded so young, I couldn't imagine how he could have been left alone. The way his voice was whimpering through the silence and stillness of the snowy-covered trees still gives me chills when I think about it. It stopped me dead in my tracks, and my heart automatically started pounding. I took my rifle off my shoulder and held it in my hand so that it would flail about as I started racing over the snowy terrain towards the voice. I stopped in the clearing to listen again as his little voice crowded again. "Dad? Help!" I bail it out. "I'm coming for you." Keep yelling. His message didn't change, as if to alert me that he had heard me. It was still just, "Dad, hell." I knew that he was on the lower side of the main road that splits the forest, in most likely near Little Waterway, known as Lamentation Creek. My brother was hunting down there, and I knew he must have been hearing the cries for help as well. I dropped off the snowy hillside, almost sliding down until I got into the road. I listened to the voice, still crying out, as I caught my breath on the roadway. I decided to steep ravine and started racing towards the creek. I thought I must be getting close, so I called out to let him know that I'm coming for him. A few moments go by and no response. I start walking briskly instead of running, so I can hear him if he cries out again. Then everything my body said, "Stop." The hair in my arms started to rise under my wool shirt, and I froze in place. The darkness was creeping steadily into the enclosed hollow. My senses became fine-tuned. I could hear every snowflake falling into place to the already snow-covered limbs above. My eyes instinctively scanned the expanse, searching for movement, color, and light. "Hello." My voice cracked as I yelled out into the dirt, getting silence. No answer. Again, I yelled off the direction of the small voice, but again, I received no reply, not from him or any other of the few dozen hunters I had seen earlier that day. My voice carried through the heaviness of the silence, and yet no one replied. I knew damn well my brother had to have heard me, but nothing. That voice inside said stop, now said leave. But I couldn't bring myself to just turn and run. I stood there for another 15 or 20 minutes, calling out to the voice in 2-minute intervals, never hearing a response. I walk through those woods slowly and as alert as I've ever been in my life, constantly checking my six and scanning for signs of life that were never there. I got back to the camp. I asked my dad and brother if they had heard the small voice, and neither of them did. Then I asked if they had heard my voice, and again they hadn't. My voice carried an echo through those woods. I know it did, and yet they hadn't heard anything. We talked to some guys who were camping close to the creek if they had a small child with them, or knew of someone missing a child, and no one had at all. I don't think there ever was a kid now. This encounter takes place when I was 13, in June at the time. Myself and 3 of my friends, aged 13 to 14, who I'll call Sam, Cam, and Ned, take a 4-day camping trip on the Wisconsin River in southernest Wisconsin. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Wisconsin River is relatively long, relatively wide. It has long, shallow stretches as deep as a couple of inches to a couple of feet. You have to walk a canoe through some of it. There's moist sandbars that run down the middle of the river as well. The adult in our trip was Cam's grandma. Even while into her 60s, she had wilderness skills on par with Bear Grylls. She has incredible stories, from viciously biting home invaders to protect her daughter, to hiking through remote mountains at midnight and sleeping surrounded by wild horses. She's a major peace, love, and happiness type from the 60s. She's way into conspiracy theories and nowadays way into Bernie Sanders. She believes wholeheartedly Bill Clinton took cocaine by the brick while in office, and non-organic foods are corporation mind control. She has reasonable arguments for both. Still, one of the most fascinating people I've ever met. Anyway, we set up camp on a beach about 3 p.m. on our first day. There's a lone still. Fishermen slightly upriver from us. This is strange, given we're mostly in the middle of nowhere, but there are occupied properties here and there on the river, so it's not crazy. Immediately, After we arrive, Grandma realizes she forgot her coffee cup in the car. What the hell, Grandma? She decides to go make the kayak trip by herself back upriver to where we part just to grab the cup and come back. She left alone us boys to go off in the shallows. Landscape-wise, there's our beach with dense forest behind it and a strait about 90 meters across between the beach and a sandbar. We're screwing around in the shallows for maybe 30 minutes when I remember being on my stomach in the water and looking up at Sam, staring all glazed to the distance. We all look. The fisherman from earlier is on the sandbar about 50 feet from us. None of us remember seeing him getting so close, especially since he has no bow and would have waded through the water. I remember there being a strange glare from the sun, so we couldn't make him out perfectly, but he was thick man in droopy, long-brimmed tat on. We cannot see his face, but collectively had the feeling that he was looking at us. It was obvious he knew our adult laughed and decided to close in. The timing was perfect, whatever. We just say that and head back to the tent. We're behind the tent for maybe a half hour playing cards and gathering firewood. We take turns peeking around the tent to check on the status of the fisherman. He's moved in, off the sandbar, through the shallows, and practically on the shore of our beach. Yes, the river is an open area, but it's unspoken that you would wander into somebody's campsite, especially when kids are alone there. We're weirded out, and Sam, being a badass 13-year-old, breaks the ice by waving his arms and yelling at the man. Hey, what's up? No response, but the man turns his body towards us, staring, completely still like wildlife caught in the headlights, or Bigfoot in one of those blurry photos. After a few seconds, he does a 180 and just starts walking away from us straight back into the water. Like he intends to keep walking, till the water comes up to his face. Cam says something along Eliza. What the hell? Sam, and we move to hang on the other end of the beach. It's been 3 and 2 hours since Grandma left. We have no idea when she's supposed to be back. We're on the complete opposite side of the beach from our camp, and due to the forest, we couldn't even see it. But as we round the bend again, we see the man standing on the shore, practically on our campsite. He's walking around our bags like he's patrolling the perimeter of the camp. Not his camp, our camp. Little more than a silhouette, and he has something, not a fishing pole. I was never brave enough to get close to check it out in detail, but all 3 of my friends would tell you he had a rifle over his shoulder. From where he got it, we don't know. He should have been able to see us from where he was, but he didn't close in anymore. We decided to play it cool and hide behind the trees. Luckily, Grandma arrives on her kayak shortly after. We call her over to us and tell her everything. But I swear to you, by the time we pointed over to her shoulder to show her the fisherman, he was gone. Like a vision. We saw him one more time that night, having a fire. The moonlight on the water illuminated his shape all the way back across the river from where we saw him the first time, fishing in the darkness. We said, "Fuck that guy," and went back to making torches. I remember digging my phone out of the waterproof box and trying to send this blurry, creepy picture of the fisherman to my friend as proof. Due to connection, she never got the image, but one text message went through to her to read, and it was something like, "He's back. He's like a weeping angel or something, coming closer. But only when you look, he goes away out of nowhere." I grew up on a mountain in the Pacific Northwest, so I spent quite a bit of time exploring local forest and memorizing the trails. As I got older, I wanted to show my friends some of the trails I wandered around as a kid. These places were pretty cool because people long ago had built stuff deep into the woods and forgotten about it, so I knew quite a few rope swings, tree forts, and ruins of old buildings. I attempted to find a Pacific Trail over for a year. It turns out the original entry had long been grown over, so it took a while to find another way to access it. Once I figured out where it was connected, we hiked down the mountain and explored it. This is where it gets weird. As I'm rounding the corner, I noticed way deep into the woods maybe about 200 feet, is a small log cabin. It's definitely nowhere near this trail and seemed at a place I snapped a few pictures of it. We kept hiking, and I couldn't stop thinking about the cabin. It looked pretty old, but I had never seen it as a kid, and I took those trails as almost every single day during the summer. I went home and immediately shared the pictures with my more adventurous group of friends. I finally convinced them to return to the trail and help me find a way to get to the cabin. A few weeks later, we hiked down the old trail, a group of 4 people. The cabin had no main trail across. So, we ended up trudging through bushes, dirt leaves, and across logs. The mountain is really uneven with lots of gullies and dried up stream beds that make it difficult to walk. Finally, we make it to the cabin, and instantly, I'm set on edge. As we approach, the first thing I see is ripped up white stuff. Later found out it was pieces of a mattress that was covered in blood and dirt. We were walking slowly now. All of us wanted to peek inside the small log cabin, not but unsure of what we had found. I convinced our guy friends to go first. The cabin was very simple, with no door, and so small you had to duck to enter. Inside were empty cans and food containers laid across the wooden floor, along with ripped-up clothing. There was a very small bed on the side that had been used quite a bit and was caked in dirt. I picked inside for about a minute, then I did a 180 and jumped back out, as I quite a bit was freaked out. Even people who squat and live in the woods know you'll bury your waist. The was literally a pound of fresh human feces. This was very unsettling. I call everyone to leave, and we follow a flatter path back to the trail. The entire day, we see pieces of ripped-up mattress, more feces, and random pieces of what I assume was clothing. When I returned home, I decided to look up the cabin online. I figured it might be a historical landmark that squatters had taken over. The weirdest thing is there was no history, absolutely nothing. No information or pictures of it online. It was like it didn't exist. I've been wanting to go back and explore around it, but now I'm too afraid I'd run into whoever was hanging out living or destroying stuff out there. A year or so back, I did a 3-month-long outdoor expedition in Arizona. We saw plenty of strange things, ranging from the Marfall Light while on our way by car to our canoeing section. But nothing beats this one strange thing only I saw. We were nearing the end of our 3-month expedition. It was probably the last 2 weeks, and we started our ISC, individual solo expeditions. We started the trip in the Galario mountain range as a whole group, but split into 4 groups of 4. My group was the most experienced tigers, so we gave ourselves a 25 to 30 mile loop through 3 days, as the rest did easier, 15 to 20 mile sections. The first day was all right with nothing too challenging. The second day, things got weird for our group. We heard footsteps near us, but no one was around. About 7 miles into the day, we saw an old abandoned cabin that we use as a marker, since it was on our map. We were going to start heading east once we reached it, but we decided to take a break near it, so we placed our bags on the ground and started to tug a snack. About 10 minutes into the break, I needed to pee, so I wandered about 30 feet closer to the cabin and started my business. I could look inside the cabin while I was standing there, so I peeked inside, and I swear to God, I saw a wispy-looking man inside the cabin, staring there. Looking at me, he was wearing an old, tattered, dirty cotton shirt and brown pants with a long white beard. As I saw the man, a chill was sent through my body. I freaked out when I saw him and quickly finished up and rushed to the others and told them what I saw. None of them believed me, so they joked a bit, but I was quite distraught by this. I told them either go look for yourselves or let's get the fuck out of here, and they realized I wasn't kidding at that point. Mind you, I'm not a huge muscular guy, but to this point in the expedition, we have gotten to know each other quite well, and they knew I wasn't really easily freaked out. I was usually the one to grab a snake and get it out of the camp or other crawling creatures. But they saw how freaked out I was, and hightailed it out of there. The rest of the day was fine until the night came around and we all heard the footsteps again. So we all become on edge and pulled out our camp knives and kept them close. Eventually, we fell asleep and nothing else bothered us for the rest of the time. But that freaked me the fuck out, and I still have nightmares about this man to this day. My husband and I were on a hunting trip deep in the North Woods. Dad pulled the 14-foot trailer out to camp and left us there with the intention that we would be up super early and secure sitting spots on public land. The camp was about 10 miles from the nearest person and 35 miles away from real civilization with street lamps and stuff. Super scenic. Have been snowing in the pine trees are really tall, and it was quiet outside. We were just laughing and talking when suddenly something big jumped into the roof. This is northern Michigan in November. There shouldn't be anything big in the woods right now. A bear would be sick or not able to hibernate for some reason, and probably will kill you. We stopped mid-sentence and looked up. Right then, it sounded like whatever had run along the roof on the trailer and jumped off into this running snow. I needed new pants. My husband starts looking for ammunition for any of the guns that we have with us. And we are both asking each other, what the actual fuck is that? There shouldn't be anything that big in the fucking woods this time of year. We didn't hear anything else. After that moment, we decided that we absolutely had to see what was going on. We heard no footsteps, but also no wrestling or anything else on a clear night with snow on the ground. You'll hear anything close by that's moving. My husband went first, opened the door peering out, no prints in front of the trailer. We slowly walked around the trailer. Being in a small clearing with only a couple of trees, we could see about 25 feet around the trailer, and after looking around and finding nothing, we just went back inside. Logic said that it was either long gone or something else was going on. It took a while to calm down, but eventually we both fell asleep. Loaded guns on the table a few feet away. The next morning, we got up and went outside to look around again. Still no tracks other than ours and some rabbits. We were outside looking away from the trailer. We heard this thing again, running right across the trailer towards us. We spun around and faced our attacker and saw some snow falling off the pine tree branches in a line across the aluminum roof. The tree branches didn't even start till 40 feet in the air, so of course we couldn't have seen them at night since it was just... Now, nothing looked off when we went to investigate the night before. We genuinely thought there was a Yeti Bigfoot or a severely pissed-off nocturnal mutant deer with a taste for blood, and it turned out to be some freaking snow falling out of a tree and hitting the roof. Me and 3 of my friends decided to grab our guns and knives to go camping out in the woods not far from the city we lived in. We were all 19 and 20 years old and always been told that Black Panther sightings have happened in the area, which was more than enough motivation for us for guys to grab some beer and guns and head out into the woods. We walked for miles in the dark, just talking and telling stories, trying to rustle up some wildlife. Then we hear it, like an old woman crying or screeching. It was far off, but it didn't matter. It was terrifying. We had heard stories of what they sound like, and we knew it when we heard it. We also heard some coyotes yelping and obviously finding something to kill because whatever it was in some serious pain. We knocked out of there, and we were going to head back when the wild card of the group says we should still sleep out there, and basically called us everything but pussies if we didn't, so we did. However, by this time we were over halfway back to the car, but still deep enough in the woods to be totally helpless if something happened. We have like a 6-person tent that we threw up, and we all hop inside. After we hung out by the fire for a bit, after we hang inside and talk, we end up falling asleep, sometime around maybe 2 or 3. I wake up, I hear a noise, and all of us step outside. Little do I know, two of the other guys in the tent have been awoken by the said noise as well. All of us stunned, not knowing what's happened, we are all silent completely, still as to not wake each other, in case that. Nothing's outside. But the noise and rustling gets louder and closer. The fire has long been out, so there's no light to see. Now, there's something brushing up against the tent and clawing at the opening to the tent. It wasn't zipped, but maybe 3/4 of the way up. Why, I don't know. Then the zipper starts lacely coming down, and we see a silhouette of a man. The three of us scream, and then the figure leap, Superman style, into the tent on top of us, swinging and kicking. We all completely lose it and start beating the shit out of this person before we realize it's our fourth friend, who was just getting out the pee, was having trouble getting back in the tent. As he drank a few beers, campfire was out, and he didn't take his flashlight. He jumped into the tent because we screamed, so he naturally thought he saw someone or something behind him, so he freaked out and tried to get in the safety of the tent. Long story short, we laughed hysterically for at least an hour after that. We didn't know which was more funny, the fact that we were total pansies and got scared to death over our friend taking a piss, or that all three of us were awake at the same time, silently losing our shit without knowing. In 2009, I was working on a trail crew in the Trinity Alps of Northern California. We had 13 people on the crew and a few support staff. At this point, we've been in the woods for about 2.5 months. We had all seen and heard bears, mountain lions, and pretty much anything that you can think of that would make terrifying noises. After dinner one evening, most of us were sitting around the fire, doing whatever, and all of a sudden, there's a huge, loud, agonizing scream sound. It was unlike anything any of us have ever heard. If I had to describe it, I'd call it a mountain lion shriek combined with the horror of a banshee. Everyone was understandably freaked the hell out. It sounded dead, reasonably close, so a few of us, myself included, decided to investigate. About 3 miles from our base camp, there was a creature tied to a tree, absolutely losing its mind. It was a fucking llama. At this point, it's 10 p.m. or so, and 25+ miles from the nearest trailhead, we find this llama, tied to a tree just off the trail. We tried to comment down without my success and went back to camp. The next morning, the llama was gone. It looked like I had broken his restraints and run off. We kept hearing the hormone llama noises from time to time over the few weeks. Towards the end of the season, a group of hunters passed us on the trail. After chatting for a bit, we found out they tied the llama there because it decided to be stubborn and refused to walk anymore. Apparently, it laid down the trail and would not move, so they left it and decided to come back for it. We figured at that point the llama was probably dead. We hadn't heard any hellacious llama screams for a few months and didn't really think about it. However, at the end of the season, when we finally got back to the crew van and we were driving out, that damn llama jumped across the road about 30 yards in front of us. I still think about the demon llama from time to time, and I hope he had a fulfilling life in the Trinities. This happened to myself and a close friend. We're both 25-year-old males. This happened just last month. We decided to go on a 2-night backpacking camping trip in the Adirondack Mountains in New York. We are both very comfortable with nature and spent a lot of time camping, hunting, fishing, and etc. We hiked about 5 miles into a small lake and set up camp on a small beach. This was not a heavily trafficked area. We did not expect to run into anyone. Our first night, there was just us, sitting around the fire. We saw a flashlight moving on the other side of the lake, and around 10:30, this was fairly unusual. However, we did not think too much of it. But as time went on, this flashlight kept moving around the lake, getting closer to our campsite. We kept discussing who could possibly be wandering around the woods in the middle of the night. We did not particularly want an unwelcomed gas. Once it was clear that the person or people were heading to our campsite, we moved off into the wood nearby to see who wandered up. I took a small axe with me, and he had a .22 rifle. Now, we weren't expecting trouble, and we certainly didn't want any, but we figured we might as well cover our bases. Now, the moment of truth. The flashlight comes near the light of our fire, and it is one man. He has a beard and is probably in his mid-40s. The scary part was, he was carrying what turned out to be a pump-action shotgun. He walked around the campsite a few times, and then proceeded to enter our tent. After running around for a minute or so, he came out and started yelling, "I know you're out here. Why don't you come say hello?" My friend and I remained motionless under a hemlock tree about 50 yards away. That is when the man proceeded to fire a shotgun into the woods, not too far from where we were. He also swung his flashlight around several times. After what felt like hours, he grabbed my friend's backpack and a few articles of clothing we had, drying off near the fire, and threw them in the burn. My friend, who had trained the .22 at the man, asked me if he would shoot. I told absolutely not, unless he spots us and starts to point the gun in our direction. Thankfully, the man moved off from where he had come out a little while. We waited until his flashlight was on the other side of the lake, ran out, grabbed everything we could fit in the backpack, and took off. It was now around 2 or 3 a.m. We ran out the trail with flashlights and made it back to my car as the sun was coming up. We immediately went to the police department, reported it. Well, we also spoke with some forest rangers. That was it. I haven't heard anything back from the police. It wasn't mysterious. However, it creeped the hell out of both of us.